Times in the New Testament where we see Jesus at the right hand of God. And He is never standing. He is always sitting at the right hand of God. And I think, this is just my opinion, I think He stands to receive His first New Testament martyr. That's just my opinion. I may be wrong. But it sounds like something Jesus would do. It sounds like something He would do. He has not abandoned Stephen. He has come to Stephen. And He has sustained Stephen in the trial. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego got the God encounter, and Stephen got the God encounter. There's no difference here, except in temporal consequence. There's absolutely no difference here. God was faithful. God came to His servant in the hard spot. God always comes to His people in the hard spot. He never doesn't do that. And whether God delivers us or God simply sustains us in the trial, He comes. He never doesn't come. The man or woman who obeys the Lord will always get more of God. I've told you this many times. One of my former pastors when I was in seminary. This is so true. I can give you personal testimony here. And many of you could give your own testimony. You get as much of God as you want. Believer, if you want Him, Jesus says, if you love me, keep my commandments. If you want Him, obey Him with glad, reckless joy. You will have God encounter after God encounter after God encounter after God encounter after God encounter. The reason many professed Christians in the modern church have such a small, little bitty, tiny, almost unrecognizable kind of faith is because they left off obeying God a long time ago. When it got risky, when it got costly, they stepped back. Now, they may still be sitting in a church, they may still be on a church roll somewhere, but they stopped following Christ a long time ago. And I think that's one reason that Christianity is slandered so much in the world, is because those who profess to be Christians live it like it's just any other dead religion. But, beloved, Christianity is no dead religion. It is no dead religion. Look at Acts 1 through 4. You know, we can't parse all that God does, but in this case, the Lord tells us what He was doing. And in our lives, when we don't understand what He's doing, we're just supposed to extrapolate that He knows what He's doing. And we're supposed to trust Him. But look at Acts 8:1. Saul was in hearty agreement of putting Stephen to death, and on that day a great persecution arose against the church in Jerusalem, and they were all scattered throughout the regions of Judea and Samaria. Verse 4. Therefore, those who had scattered went about doing what? What did those who were scattered, what did they do? They preached the gospel. God was scattering His church to go get His people in the rest of the world. God was doing a complex good thing in the stoning of Stephen. Beloved, don't question God's providences in your life. Worship Him and obey Him. That's it. Christianity is so simple. It is so simple. Don't kick against the hard providences of God. Worship God. And obey Him. People around you will get converted. If you live like that, people around you will get converted. God will convert people around you when you live like that. Let's just briefly, I want to close, just take a really quick look at Hebrews 11, just to make a few closing points here. You know, Hebrews 11, that's one of those passages that the prosperity preachers never talk about. But if you look at Hebrews 11, you look at the sufferings that are mentioned in verses 35 to 38. And you see that those sufferings came by faith. They came by faith. If you read the text, you'll see it comes by faith. The same kind of faith that brought the victories in verses 33 and 34. By faith, some escaped the edge of the sword, verse 34. By faith, some were put to death with the sword, verse 37. We need to know how to talk about this and understand this. The suffering, misery, torture, imprisonment, and death spoken of in verse 35 to 38 are not owing to God's unfaithfulness or His impotence, but rather to His perfect sovereign plan. God decides when to deliver His people from suffering, and He decides when to sustain them in the midst of that suffering without deliverance. This is God's business. This is not your business. This is not my business. It's God's business. In the faith of His people, God sometimes puts His raw power on display for the believer and everyone around him to see, and He delivers us. In the faith of His people, God sometimes puts His sufficiency on display for those around us to see that He satisfies our hearts so much that we don't have to have deliverance. He is enough. He is infinitely more than enough. He's beautiful and satisfying. Whether I'm in the midst of blessing or in the midst of torture, my God is worthy. My God is compellingly beautiful. And I want you to see that when God allows His people to suffer in the trial, I want you to see that in my opinion, that is more of a powerful testimony to His beauty and sufficiency than if He swooped in and supernaturally delivered by His raw power. What does real faith believe in the moment of torture? That if God loved me, He would get me out of this? That's not what real faith believes. Now that superficial kind of, I attend church kind of faith believes that. But biblical faith believes that God is better than the miracle of deliverance. His raw power is not on display in the lives of those who suffer. His breathtaking beauty is on display in the lives of those who suffer and will not recant, and will not rail, and will not call God to account. Beloved, Jesus said in this life you will have trouble. And if you have trouble in your life right now, why are you wringing your hands? You're supposed to be looking at God and expecting a God encounter. Expecting a God encounter. So these that suffer, their lives shout that God's better than anything this life can give, and God is better than anything death can take. This is why God lets His people suffer sometimes. Because it is an irrefutable testimony to the beauty and breathtaking nature of God. I don't preach the false prosperity sham gospel. It is a counterfeit. And let me tell you another reason I don't preach it. It's just simply too small for me. Man, I can't live hoping for some trinkets in the world. I can't live for that. My heart, that doesn't fill up my heart. A beautiful, sovereign Redeemer God fills up my heart. It's just, the sham gospel, it's just too small for us. So I preach a God who is worthy to live for and worthy to die for. Piper is right. Biblical faith loves God more than job, more than money, more than dream houses, more than retirement, more than marriage, more than children, more than life. Biblical faith says whether God handles me tenderly or gives me over to torture, I love Him unconditionally. And my challenge to you, beloved, is to go out there and live like that's true in your life. David said it perfectly in Psalm 63:3. O God, your loving kindness is better than life.